Hello YouTube world, it is Liam, the Deaf to Metalhead, and I'm doing a topic video today. So I got the idea from another YouTuber who goes by the name of Metal Mickey. You can check out his channel above my head. Now if you like men that wear bathrobes and basically are naked on camera while they talk to you, he's your guy. I mean, he gets off on that kind of thing. And it amazes me how many subs he's got just purely wearing a bathrobe. He gets out of the bath, puts the camera on. It's basically OnlyFans, but you're getting it for free. So go check out his YouTube channel, because it was his idea. Well, it was his video anyway, and I've seen a few people steal it. And I've done a survey recently, and people said do that. So why not? I've got plenty of stuff to show. Essentially, these 25 albums aren't 10 out of 10s or nothing like that. These are 25 albums that, if I say went to a desert island, this would be the 25 I'd take throughout my metal livelihood, should we say, from my late teens when I discovered heavy metal right through till now. These are the 25 albums that kind of shaped me and stayed with me, and you know, I will always go back to, like, every other year, you know, when you have like a kick and you need a certain, you know, a certain type of band. These are the albums I kind of go for. So they're in no particular order, you know, a mishmash of styles, but it's all heavy metal essentially. So the first one I thought I'd go with is the band that got me into metal in the first place. Now, I discovered heavy metal in the year 2000. New metal was rife, so it was inevitable that I was going to find a metal band of that style first, and that band was Korn. Now this is the album Issues. This is an alternative cover. I don't know why they did the alternative covers. My girlfriend in high school got me this as like a Valentine's Day present, and I was like, what's album is this? Because I know it as the Doll, but this obviously isn't the Doll one. This is like a special edition one. But yeah, it was it's an album that stuck with me, you know. I mean, I love The Day of You, but this one always kind of edges it for me just because of the tone on it, and there's so many songs on this that were music videos as well. It kind of shaped me and has stayed with me ever since. So like songs like Hey Daddy, Somebody Someone, that was one of my favourites, Beg For Me, Make Me Bad, Falling Away From Me, that was one of the bigger ones off his album. There's absolutely tons on here that are all still relevant today. So if you hate new metal, I get it, because to be fair, I struggle to listen to any of the kind of bands I used to listen to as a kid. But Korn has that kind of nostalgic feel for me, and there's only certain albums I can dive into. Like the second one I can't stand anymore. Follow the Leader really doesn't do it for me either. But Issues, you know, that'll always, you know, always get played. So that's the first one. Turn that down over there. Second one is a band that everybody loves in their own weird way. You know, you can't argue that they've had such an impact on the heavy metal world as a whole. You know, there's always going to be one song or one album that everyone will say, yeah, I like that. Now for me, Metallica's And Justice For All is that album. Now I obviously heard them from the Black album. That was everywhere when I started listening to heavy metal. Nothing else matters. Never liked that one. But Enter Sandman, you know, always on Kerrang. But when I discovered in college the website YouTube, funny enough what I'm doing this on, you know, when that was brand new, you could watch Harvester of Sorrow live in Moscow with all the, you know, guards beating on fans and that kind of thing, and I just loved it. And there and then I was transfixed with that song and this album, because to me Metallica can do anything they want, don't really care. This will be always the album I go back to. Blackened, Harvester of Sorrow, Shortest Straw, Die Is Eve, To Live Is To Die, you know, the whole album as a whole. But you know, Blackened and Harvester of Sorrow especially, I mean, even one, you know, that was always on all the time. It's just a classic album for me, and I absolutely love it to death. I don't really care, there's no bass in it. I'm a guitar player as well, so you know, no bass, meh, just tune lower. But you know, absolutely love that album. Always go back to that one, and I'm trying to get my kids into heavy metal now, and that's one of the albums I've been using a lot. Now Black Sabbath, I obviously discovered through Ozzy Osbourne. Paranoid album was one of the first ones I think I picked up from them when I was trying to go down that route of going into Doom, and the kind of classic rock kick as well I had as a late teen, which you'll see in a few of these albums. But the best Black Sabbath album for me is actually a Dio one, and that is Dehumanizer. Now, I think the reason I like this so much is because it's probably the heaviest Black Sabbath album in regards to riffs of Tony Iommi's ever written. Like really, really heavy, really like dirty riffs. You know, like Sabbath have a lot of classic rock feel to me, and they're more of a I wouldn't call them a metal band, I'd call them more of a hard rock, classic rock band with Ozzy. But when you go down the Dio route, especially the latter Dio albums, they are metal albums. And this one especially is just pure heavy metal. I mean, Buried Alive is my favourite track off here by miles, and I still listen to that. My wife knows it now because of me. My kids know it because of me. You know, when they think of Black Sabbath, they actually think of that song, even though I tell them, you know, there's so many. But this, for me, is the best. I mean, the best artwork as well by a country mile. I mean, it is a bit shit, but it's still the best Sabbath artwork for me. So yeah, Dehumanizer, classic album for me. Now, the first ever death metal album I ever heard was this album, and for some reason it's stuck with me ever since. I heard it in probably 2002, 2001, around that time, and a mate of mine, his mum used to pick us up from high school, and for whatever reason he was proper mental, didn't have a dad, and he'd hang out the window just scream at kids as we were walking back or driving back from high school, and he was blasting this Cannibal Corpse's Eaten Back to Life. Now, ironically, this is their first album, but I heard this, like I say, in 2001, 2002, so way more albums after this one. But this is the first one I heard, and I was like, what the fuck is that? Well over the top. And I used to think Korn was really, really heavy, and, you know, nothing was heavier than Korn, but then I heard this, and it completely changed me. And I used to think it was stupid, but as time went on, weirdly enough, I liked it more and more and more. And the older I get, the more I think this is quite tame now compared to what I like now. So it's just funny how, as time goes on, you change so much musically. And, you know, people say, oh, you can get into Cannibal Corpse anytime. You really can't. You have to kind of be in the right frame to get it. And I didn't get it the first time I heard it. But now, you know, this is my favourite Cannibal Corpse album. There's loads of great ones. Too Many Mutilated, The Bleeding, you know, they're all classics. Even latter ones like Kill. Even the newest one's alright, but for me, it'll always be this album, always. So, love a bit of Cannibal Corpse, but purely that one. Now, we'll go completely left field. This album was in the height of me growing my hair out completely down to my shoulders. I started wearing blazers, like jackets, and trying to look like I was in the 70s. No idea why, and still to this day can't really think why I did it, but I had this massive classic rock kick. As I left high school, I kind of ditched heavy metal. I still loved it, but I went like off to Hendrix, Thin Lizzy, then I went off to like bands like Mark Bolan and T-Rex, all sorts of random things, and I still listen to them now and again, but nowhere near as what I used to. But this album is one I always go back to, and that is Led Zeppelin's 4. I mean, yeah, it's got, was it Stairway to Heaven on it, which, to be fair, is quite boring, but I haven't listened to it for years now, so I could probably put that on and I'd probably get through it all without skipping it. But for me, the best song on this album, and the one I always listen to, is When the Levee Breaks and Black Dog. Those two songs off this album, you know, always in a playlist. Always, if I have a on Journey and I compile a big playlist on Spotify, those two songs normally feature on it. Just a great album. You know, I really liked Led Zeppelin, and it was Jimmy Page who kind of inspired me to buy my own guitar. And the first guitar I ever got was a Les Paul knockoff, you know, just because of him. And it's just weird how I completely U-turned on that style completely. And, you know, I can play a few riffs off this album, but I'm not a classic rock guitar player, even close. But yeah, I love Led Zeppelin. You know, I have the DVDs back there, you know, I've got loads of stuff from them. Now, best thrash metal band for me, and always will be, Overkill. Now this album, I think this is their 4th or 5th album, but this is when they completely changed their lineup and went from a 3-piece to a 4-piece? 4-piece? 5-piece? 5-piece. And it's their best album, and still is for me. And the songs on here that sold it for me was obviously the title track, Horoscope. I heard that, it was a bit doomy, and at that time I loved my doom, and I loved thrash, so the two merging was just spot on. And the fact that Bobby's vocals are so unique, and I was really into King Diamond, Rob Halford, you know, that kind of resonated with me. And it's just riff after riff after riff. I mean, it's got a cover sonnet, which is Frankenstein, but then I was going through a classic rock phase as well, so that kind of resonated with me as well. And I've seen this band 3 or 4 times, and they've killed it every single time I've seen them live. You know, I love this band. They can do no wrong for me. I mean, nowadays I don't get too excited when they put an album out, because they are pretty much the same every album they put out. It's good, but it's not, doesn't stand out. Whereas like this one, and maybe a couple more in their discography stand out with all the others. You know, this isn't purely thrash, it's got some slower moments, it's heavy. So if you've never listened to that, you really should, because that is a classic album. Now, another band that no one really talks about anymore because the guitarist was a bit naughty and went on a protest that kind of bit him in the arse, but Iced Earth, I saw these guys live with Tim Ripper Owens as the vocalist way back when Heaven and Hell were touring, and that was kind of the last time I saw Dio before he died. And I saw Iced Earth for the first time and I thought they were absolutely amazing. I think Something Wicked This Way Comes was the album at the time, so I went looking for their music, and the one that stood out the most was the concept album Horror Show. And to this day I will always go to this album out of all the Iced Earth albums, purely because the songs are just really catchy, they're heavy and they're different, they're a bit thrashy some moments and they're a bit slow and chuggy, then a bit theatrical, a bit power metal-y, you know. There's loads going on this album. And you got the like Phantom of the Opera one with a kind of female bouncing off the vocalist with different vocal styles, and it's just really, really cool. But the track Frankenstein for me has got one of the best riffs off that album, and Damien, that's another really cool one as well by memory. And then there's obviously another Iron Maiden cover which they do on quite a lot of their albums, which was Transylvania. So yeah, really, really great album. I still, you know, have that randomly playing now and again. Now this is the album that kind of pushed me down the Death Doom path and made me a super fan of this band, shall we say. And this is My Dying Bride's A Line of Deathless Kings. This is a special edition box set. So if I open it up, you can see the booklet for what the actual album cover should look like. This album was the very first My Dying Bride album I ever heard. I was at a bus stop. Oh, I must have been about 18, 19, probably 19 years old, crying my eyes out because my girlfriend at the time had dumped me. And I had an iPod Classic back then, and I scrolled through to try and find the most miserable sounding songs I could find. And I think it was The Blood, The Wine, The Roses. And yeah, since then, it's weird, I heard it for the first time because I downloaded them, never listened to them. And if you remember the iPod Classics, you could have hundreds and hundreds of songs. So I always kind of deviated to the ones I already knew. I didn't really explore what I downloaded, because I used to torrent all the time. And yeah, I listened to that album after that, the whole bus journey home, and after that I went home and listened to it some more. It made me feel shit, and I wanted to feel shit. And it's really weird, if you kind of get this kind of style of music, you appreciate it more, and you just kind of absorb it for what it is. And ironically, I'm in a Death Doom band now, I have been for well over 12 years. And if you can hear it in the background, Calvin's black metal project, which sounds like My Dying Bride, because he was in My Dying Bride, so if you can hear that, that's why it sounds like this. Yeah, an amazing band, and I love them to death. And I've only ever seen them live once, because they're really fucking hard to see live, because I'm always busy when they play the one show in whatever, how many years they play the UK. So yeah, My Dying Bride, specifically that album. Eternally to Swans is a classic, as all of them are to me, pretty much, but that one is the one I go to the most. Right, next one is a band that was a super group, and it ticked all the boxes, and it still does to this day, and I wish they released at least some kind of new music for me to buy, and that is Grand Supreme Blood Court with Bow Down Before the Blood God. Blood Court even, not the Blood God, that's the poetry. I mean, look at that artwork. I mean, that was the main reason I ever checked this out in the first place, and then I found out who was in the band. So you've got, well, I'll show you the back of it and you can see already. So you've got the man, Asphyx, two original Asphyx. I think he was in Hail of Bullets. He's the current bass player in Asphyx. So it's essentially Asphyx, you know. I'm a big Asphyx fan, as you'll see with the next one. And this album just fucking, the tone on it is so naughty. It's the bass, filthy, the guitar just sounds spot on. It's really thick, really crisp. The songs are to the point. They're doomy, they're sludgy and horrible. It's just amazing. And I heard that Transcending Records will be repressing this on vinyl, so I'm very keen to get hold of it, because I absolutely love this, and this always is in rotation at some point throughout the year. You know, I'll leave it alone for a little while and I'll come back to it again, but an absolute classic album that I still listen to this day. And then following on for that, the album that made me discover them in the first place, Asphyx's The Last One on Earth. That cover art alone sold it to me, and the title track was the main reason I love this band to this day, and everything they put out I love. not a bad album from this band. Even the ones without Van Drunen on it, I still like. And this is a reissue with tons of extras. But yeah, Asphyx. I mean, most people watching this channel will know who Asphyx are. Absolute classic band, and I love them to death. Absolutely love them. But this album is always the one I grab and put on, because it's just heavy, raw. You know, it's a brilliant album. And out of the CDs, the last one is Bloodbath, Nightmares Made Flesh. Absolute classic Swedish death metal, but a super group. So you got Peter, the frontman of Hypocrisy, two dudes from Catatonia, the drummer at the time who's now in IVth as well, and I think Dan Swano was on this one. I can't remember who was, obviously I can't remember the band he was in, but you know Dan Swano, everyone knows who Dan Swano is. But yeah, amazing album. Back to, you know, every single song on this album is a classic, but Aeturnus was obviously the most famous one, I imagine, off this whole album. An absolute classic death metal song. And Cancer of the Soul was another one I absolutely loved. The drumming on it, everything is spot on. I discovered this band, funny enough, through YouTube as well. I was watching their live at Wacken, their very first show they ever did, where they're wearing like the white rags and they're covered in blood, and it just blew me away at how good it was, so I had to have it straight away. So I ordered this. I can't even remember where I ordered it from. I think Amazon at the time, years ago now, good 9 years ago now. And yeah, I love this album, absolutely love it. Stone cold classic. Let's have a drinks break before we go on to the vinyl. So if you've got this far so far, cheers. I'll be wittering on. Right, vinyl, and then we'll call it a day. So this album, this whole band, I absolutely love, but this was the album that sold it for me. Ahab, with the Divinity of Oceans. Now everyone always goes to their debut, which is a classic, and I have back there as well. But this is the very first Ahab album I ever heard. Tombstone Carousel, I think it is. Yeah, is the first Ahab song I ever heard, and it's so fucking heavy. The guitar tone on this is spot on for me. It's really low, really dirty. Now Funeral Doom, you know, as I've got older, I've got really into now. I can pretty much get through any Death Doom or Funeral Doom band without really struggling now. But back then, Funeral Doom was a new concept to me. I couldn't stand the long songs. But when I heard this band, they didn't feel so long, even though they are. The way they build them, the atmosphere with the clean vocals, the reverbs they use, and then the kind of breakdowns, it taught me so much, and kind of reflected in my guitar playing for a few years, how they write riffs. Absolutely classic German Funeral Doom, still killing it now. Saw these guys live, blew me away, I thought they were amazing. Spoke to them when I brought some merch, just normal nerdy looking dudes. And you know, as you get older, that whole mythos of meeting a band kind of gets destroyed, because you think, wow, they're like superheroes when you see them on stage, and then you get to meet them and like, oh, probably plays D&D or something like that. But yeah, love me some Ahab. Classic Funeral Doom. Next one is a staple in the British death metal scene, and a band that I fell in love with for many reasons, and that is Bolt Thrower, specifically this album, The Fourth Crusade. I was into my Doom at the time, and I heard that track. It's very doomy, then it gets a bit heavier, a bit faster, but it's more mid-paced, and I learned about mid-paced death metal purely through this band. And the cover art as well, you know, the eye, and I've seen these guys at least 2 times. Amazing band, shame they're not around anymore, but for obvious reasons. You know, you can go see Memoriam now and you pretty much get the same thing. But yeah, I love me some Bolt Thrower. You know, all their albums I can get through quite happily, but this is the main one for me. And for Victory is probably the other one that's a really good one. But cover wise, this is what lured me in. And yeah, love Bolt Thrower, love them. These are all falling on me, right. Next one is the first Epic Doom album I ever heard. And to this day, my favourite Epic Doom album I've ever heard. Tales of Creation by Candlemass. This is their fourth album. Third album with Messiah on vocals. This came out 1989, the year I was born, so it's 32 years ago. It's a long time ago. Classic album, not as riff heavy as say their earlier works like Nightfall or even Epicus. You know, those two are classic Candlemass albums as well. But this is the one I always go to because of the title track, even though I don't know what it's about the story of life and death and the creation. I'm not a religious guy, even remotely. but the riffs on it were so heavy, and I remember getting on the college bus and I had my headphones on and I listened to this all the time, and it's blueprinted in my head, like all the riffs. Like you've got a reworking of Under the Oak, which is borderline a Celtic cross song the way it plays, absolute classic. Dark Reflections, Tears, and then you got that Into the Unfathomed Tower, which is just Lars just shredding away. Really cool song. So yeah, if you never listened to this one, you must. I mean, Epicus, Nightfall, all classics, but for me that is my favourite Candlemass album. Now these guys are an American band that I always brag about. I've played with at a festival, because the chances of me saying that and that being believable a couple of years ago would have been really unrealistic. But I was lucky enough to play with these guys in Portugal, and that is Daylight Dies. And this is again their third or fourth album, Dismantling Devotion, an absolute classic if you're into kind of death doom, but also the melodic side of doom, because they do a lot of clean vocals as well, and the instrumental parts and the kind of harmonies they use are very clean. They're not evil and miserable sounding, they're more sorrowful and artistic, if you look at it that way, in a weird way of wording it. But I absolutely fucking love this album. This is a 10 out of 10 album for me, and one that I can put on any time of the year, especially this time now where it's darker early and it's colder. This album just fits that time of the year. It's just a beautiful album. If you've never checked it out, I strongly recommend you check it out, because it is an absolute classic and one I absolutely love. And this is one I've only had a good couple of years, but if I look at my streams of this album, this is number 2 out of the whole lot of my lifetime of using Spotify. And also when I've been out and about, I've listened to this album fucking so much, it's unreal. Germany's Funeral Fuck, Carnal Confessions. Now, just if you don't know what this band is, based off that title you're going to think, what the fuck is that? Sounds ridiculous. It is about the Catholic Church, as you probably gather by the artwork. It is quite a dark album, but this is epic doom with epic vocals, and it is a massive nod to Candlemass. These guys are German, but you wouldn't know that. There's no accent or anything that gives it away. It just sounds like if you put Candlemass in a room with, say, Solitude, Aeturnus, you kind of have that kind of merge of the two. Even though they're very similar, it's got that strength to it. It's such a classic album. Again, this is another 10 out of 10. Every song on this album is stellar. So if you never checked this album out, strongly recommend it, because you won't be disappointed. It's an absolute classic album, and one I've never got bored of. An absolute gem in my collection, that one. Now this one, probably one of my it is my favourite death metal band ever. Dutch death metal, Titans, Gorefest, and this is actually their last ever album they ever did, Rise to Ruin. They were brutal, heavy, and then they gradually turned into a Thin Lizzy death metal band with death metal vocals. But then they came back, did 2 albums, and this is the last one, which I absolutely love to bits. I love all their albums, to be fair, but this one has a special place in my heart because this is the first one I ever heard, and quite tricky to find on vinyl. It hasn't been reissued like the other ones have, but this is a back and black one as well. But yeah, this came out, I think it must have been around 2005, 2006 maybe, I could be wrong. I haven't done any research on any of the dates, but I remember hearing it around that time. But yeah, absolute stone cold classic for me. Heavy, riffy, production's great. Excuse me, just an amazing album. So if you've never checked this one out, obviously Erase, False, all classics. Mine Lost, you know, I wouldn't argue with you at all. Give this one a go if you haven't, because it is very riffy, very catchy, and I love it as well. So can't go wrong with some Gorefest. Right, next one. Some Death Doom from Finland, and my favourite Death Doom band from that part of the world. Hooded Menace. All their albums are great. I love all their albums, but you know, Never Cross the Dead is my favourite, just by margin. Just because of the artwork, first one I ever heard, you know, everything about this band, you know, they didn't really change their style. You know, I can't open it up, it's not a gatefold. It's got 2 vinyls in it, but it's not a gatefold. Excuse me. Right, yeah, Hooded Menace, Finnish Death Doom, put a new one out this year, which was even better than I thought it was going to be, but this is, you know, the tits. And if I went on, like I say, Desert Island, this would be the one I grabbed from them. So yeah, Hooded Menace. Need some more fluids. That's better. Right. Now, when I first ever heard this vocalist, I thought, wow, that's awful. But then I quickly changed my mind, and the more and more I listened to it, you know, I really got into it. And this was the days of LimeWire. I used to download random bands that I knew the name of. And one of the songs off this album I downloaded, Bye Bye Missy, but someone enhanced the volume so it was really fucking loud. So when I put it on my iPod, that was the loudest song, and I had to always turn it down. Especially if I dozed off on the bus, that was the song I guaranteed I made sure I woke up again. And obviously I'm talking about King Diamond's Them, my favourite King Diamond album. Conspiracy is also another one I absolutely love. But I don't know, this is the first song, like say Bye Bye Missy was the first ever song I ever heard. You know, and it's been a love affair ever since. Can't go wrong with King Diamond. I love King Diamond even more now because my wife absolutely hates King Diamond. So when we're in the car, she normally goes for the stereo to turn it off, skip it, which results in a massive argument because I hate it when people do that to me. Even my own wife, you know, I will kick off. I love King Diamond. Don't fuck about. So yeah, King Diamond. Love King Diamond. Now, his band, many people probably don't even know who they are. Swedish epic doom, but not Candlemass or anything like that. These came on a bit later. Inspired band, the band name is inspired by the band Trouble, you know them from Chicago. And this is Memory Garden with the album Tides, one of the best unheard epic doom albums you'll probably ever hear. If you're into that kind of style of music and you don't know who I'm talking about, this is strongly recommended. This is a reissue that came out last year through Jolly Roger Records in Italy, but this album came out in the mid-90s or maybe early 90s, I can't really remember. But an absolute classic album for me, and I've had a real Memory Garden kick lately, and I've been listening to all their discography when I've been working out and about. Amazing band, very theatrical operatic vocals, so if you like Queensryche, Candlemass, Solitude, Aeturnus, you know, all that kind of style of singing, you'll absolutely love this band. Very riffy, great on the harmonies, the solos, everything. They're Swedes, so you know they're going to be decent musicians. Very chunky, very riffy, especially this album. There is one album in the mid-90s that was just shite, didn't like that one at all. Carnival Bazaar, I think it's called. It has some good tracks on it, but as a whole, it doesn't have a scratch on any of their other albums. And they're still going strong now. I think they're putting a new album out either this year or start of next year. So yeah, go check out some Memory Garden, because that Tides album is amazing. Now, favourite ever death metal song is Where the Slime Lives, and up there with my favourite ever death metal album is Domination, an album that a lot of pure old school death metalers hate, but like I said, this is the first one I ever heard, and I still love it to this day. Would pick this over Blessed, would pick this over Altars, I would pick this over Covenant. You know, I'd always pick this one, always listen to this one the most. Where the Slime Lives, my kids know it off by heart, bless them. I don't even like death metal. That's how much I listen to this album. So yeah, Morbid Angel, Where the Slime, Domination even. Where the Slime Lives is the best song though. Now, I said My Dying Bride, but obviously I also am a big Paradise Lost fan. Not as big as My Dying Bride, but I do like me some Paradise Lost. Especially this album, Draconian Times. This is obviously a reissue. Now I know my friend Mark IVth has a soft spot for the first track off this album, Enchantment. He loves that song. Really inspired him, I think. But yeah, anyway, this is a classic album. I love it to bits. Back to front, you know, my kind of album. You know, I forget sometimes how good this can be, and when they reissued it and remastered it, it sounds even better than I remember. Classic album, classic band. Really, they've been going for so many years as well. And yeah, they put out a few shit albums throughout the years, but what band hasn't really? So yeah, Paradise Lost, Draconian Times. I would choose that one. Now, this one is a alternative cover to the original, but Solitude Aeturnus' Downfall is probably the most played Solitude Aeturnus album that I've listened to as a whole album. Now, Beyond the Crimson Horizon is my favourite Solitude Aeturnus album, but I haven't got a copy of that. They're so expensive to get hold of. It is the only one I need, and I complete the whole set. But when I look at my stats, which I for some reason know how to do, I can see that when I revisit this streaming wise, this is the most listened to Solitude Aeturnus album I have listened to, and my whole time being online. Together and Wither is my favourite. Midnight Dreams, that's a classic as well. Only This and Nothing More. You know, every song on this is even a I think it's Christian Death cover. I can't remember what it's called now. Chapel Burning or Death Wish, I can't remember which one it is. But yeah, an amazing album. you know, a band that, you know, most people don't really talk about that much. I mean, the first two people talk about it and not the rest. For me, the whole catalogue is stellar. Right, two more, and I'll bugger off. Russians Scold. This is another reissue. But this album is called what's it called? Will of the Gods Has Great Power. This is the only album they ever did. They are reformed, and they have. I'm losing my voice. And they have put out another EP recently with a new vocalist. They lost their vocalist straight after finishing the first album. They then disbanded and did their own thing. But I remember hearing this at least 2007, 2008, when I was kind of discovering Candlemass, and I heard this band as well for the first time, and I thought, oh, that sounds so old. But it's just purely based off the recording. They were after Candlemass, so they were around at least 93, 92. But, you know, because the production was so shit, I thought it was older. And for years I thought, oh, such an obscure epic doom band, I love it, and no one else has heard this band. But obviously loads of people have heard this band. You know, Russia, even though it's such a big place, you'd be hard to press to name more than 20 bands off the top of your head from that country, say. And Scold, I absolutely love Scold. This whole album is a back to front classic for me. Love it to bits. Still listen to it to this day, especially in the colder months. I'll put this one on because it just kind of clicks and it works even better. And obviously being Russian, it's always cold there, I imagine, that I know of anyway. So yeah, Scold, love that band, love that album. And lastly, a Stone Cold Doom classic, no death or anything like that, Doom metal through and through. When I was listening to Thin Lizzy Lows, I loved that dual guitar harmony stuff, and I still do to this day. And this band turned it up a whole bunch when they do it. And there's a groovy elements in there. It's funky, heavy, you know, brilliant band. And that's Trouble with Psalm 9. Amazing band. And rest in peace to the singer. That's going to be really shit because I can't remember his name now, isn't it? Eric Wagner. There you go, I remembered it just off the bat. Amazing album. His vocals were a bit iffy for me at the start when I first heard them, because it reminded me a lot of Rush and Geddy Lee and that whole kind of chic kind of sound in his tone. But the more you listen to it, you don't really hear it after a while, and it takes on its own kind of persona. And you know, even when they finished Trouble and he did The Skull, another band I really liked as well. But this was the first album I heard. The title track was the first one I heard. I think Scuzz TV was blasting it out. It was like a special. And yeah, I love me some Trouble. I think it was actually Wino was talking about this album from The Obsessed and how pivotal it was that you listened to it. So I did. And I've been a massive fan ever since. So yeah, Trouble. Amazing band. So that is my 25 albums of all time that I think are amazing and I listen to on and off all the time. Thank you, Mike, for the idea to do this video. Like I say, go check out his YouTube video of it, because you know he came out with it, and his albums, nearly all of them, I didn't know what they were. So you know, these videos are interesting if you want to find out some new music. So in the meantime, please like this video if you survived to the end. I'm very grateful. Please subscribe if you are new. I've got loads of cool content coming at you right now that you can check out. And thank you to everyone that's recently subbed the channel. Really appreciate it, and I hope you're enjoying the content. I will speak to you in the comment section. Take care. Cheers.